2 of our Live at the Rainbow special with Rosie Horide. I hope you enjoyed part 1, in which we discussed Freddie and Brian and her history with the band. In this second part, we'll go on to the acclaimed rhythm section of Roger Taylor and John Deacon. We go back and touch on the Rainbow and what it was like at the time. We discuss Rosie's current relationship with the band. Tim Staffel, we also discuss. Bohemian Rhapsody, her favourite album. Plus we also discuss her feelings of when she got the news of Freddie's passing. And a myriad of other things. It's just a wonderfully warm interview with a lovely, lovely lady. So here we go. Part 2. Here comes Rosie.
We gotta tear it up, stir it up, raise it up, baby.
You've done Freddie, you've done Brian.
We went somewhere else then. Brian, really, because Brian's so interesting.
Ah, okay, keep going.
There's one little story I'll tell you about Brian. I've said to you that they weren't, certainly in those early days, what I would have called the archetypal rock and roll band. They were much too sensible and intelligent to throw televisions out of windows or do anything like that.
For sure.
Or the whole, drug fuel binges. It just didn't happen,
Yeah.
And believe me, I was around. So.
That was just you doing that?
Yeah, it was just me.
You to calm down, yeah.
But what was the funniest one was, I remember one of the other journalists saying to me, well, where's Brian then? And I said, I can guess. And I was absolutely right. He used to take a telescope on tour with him.
Oh, right, I didn't know.
Because he's an influential astronomer.
Sure, yeah.
And he would be up on the roof or wherever he could get, or a balcony or something, looking at the stars, because it helped him calm down. And so it would be after a gig, and he would chill out, and he would go and do that. He might have a drink, but that would be that, But he would take that, or he would be listening to Beatles music, which he always loved.
Really?
Yeah.
Yes, that's a lovely news
Absolutely
story.
loved the Beatles, and when the highlight of my career apart from Queen was interviewing John Lennon.
Wow.
And
this is a whole other podcast series.
And they were. I know that at that point, if I'd said, "Do you want to come?" they would all have come with me, but I don't think it would have worked.
Yeah.
So there was a lot more to them. They weren't. I was dealing with rock stars, pop stars every day of the week, and they were completely different. Completely different from anybody else. There were a lot of idiots out there. There were a lot of people with no brain. There were a lot of people who were tried on because you were a woman. All this kind of thing. And then there was them, and that was it was so refreshing. It was just a treat.
Wow.
An absolute treat. So, but Brian is amazing because he loves his music. To this day, he loves his music. I've been very lucky recently to have a very little bit to do with his charity. And
Save Me charity.
Yeah, with Save Me and the whole thing against the badger cull and fox hunting. And I've been down to where the charity is based. And he doesn't have to do that. He doesn't have to take all the flack he gets from it and all the aggravation, but it's something he believes in. And so, apart from obviously his family who he loves and everything else, he's still doing what he believes in.
Has he changed much?
I haven't actually seen him for quite a long time.
Yeah.
We've exchanged a couple of emails, and obviously I've sort of been involved in it, circle.
Yeah.
And if I email him, he always emails straight back. I was so proud of him when he was on top of Buckingham Palace that I emailed him.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I got an email back at about 2 o'clock in the morning saying, yeah, it was fun.
Yeah, it was fun.
but he just, he really does get a lot of stick for the charity, and yet he does it, and he spends his own money doing it. And a lot of pop stars by now would be resting on their laurels in wherever.
He has so much going on.
And he never stops. It seems to me, just looking at it from a distance, that he just never stops. And he loves to play as well. There are occasions where he would, I think, has to be restrained from joining in with bands, and when he has this annual thing for his charity at Guildford Cathedral.
Yeah, that's right, yeah.
I think we have to sort of stop him going on stage with all the bands, because he loves playing. So that's what he does.
Well, we'll get to that, but what else are they supposed to do? These guys are musicians.
But so many of them just think, I've done that, I've earned my money, that's that, and I'll go and...
But I guess what I kind of meant was that the Queen have been put in a position where they continuing what they're doing is always going to be very different because they're in a situation where they lose their front man. but they're musicians. What else are they supposed to do? They can't stop. It's what they do. I mean, I know Brian has lots of other things going, but it's what he does.
Yeah. It must have been the most difficult decision, because I know how heartbreaking the Freddie thing was. They obviously knew about it a long time before anybody else did. And they lived through it with him, effectively. And it was awful. And it really was, I gather, absolutely dreadful. And he was so ill. And I think it really must have knocked the heart out of them for a while. And I wondered what they'd do. I mean, there were those who said they couldn't go back on. You know, there was just no Queen without Freddie. And it was very interesting that they went with Paul Rodgers first.
Yeah.
Because he's a good old-fashioned rock and roll star, great singer, their era.
Solid man, kind of bluesy.
Great, you know, lovely, really worked really well. And now they've gone with Adam Lambert, who is more of a showman.
Yeah.
Nobody will ever be Freddie, and it would be a huge mistake for him to try and be Freddie, and I'm sure he won't.
No.
But nevertheless, he's a showman.
Show, yeah.
And he does have an amazing voice. And so it's very interesting to see him going out there. And also what's really interesting is that this whole new generation's taking to Queen now. You know, the latest generation, the Adam Lambert generation, if you like.
I always had this thing that, you know, this argument goes on every single day. Online, offline, fans all over the place. This word replace, there's no such, they haven't replaced anyone. Freddie hasn't left the band, they haven't fired him, they're not carrying on saying, you know, there's going to be no reunion tour, there's no replacement, that word doesn't need to be used. They've simply got someone who's helping them sing songs.
Yeah.
It's that simple, because they don't have that person who sings those songs anymore. And so many people get so caught up in it, I think, and I understand why people get very emotive about it, because some people like yourself, they're at the beginning or they've grown up with this band, and music is the most emotive art there is out there. It's a soundtrack to everyone's lives, and I understand that, but they're just going out there and having someone else helping them sing their songs and do what they do.
Absolutely.
And I don't mean that lightly for who Freddie Mercury was and is and always will be, but it's just what they need to do. And
they're not like Genesis, where, you know, there were other people in the band like Phil Collins who wanted to be the lead singer, so when Peter Gabriel went
back to front,
you know, whatever. While they all do this songs and love it, none of them wanted to be the frontman. They didn't want to be the man strutting around in the front of the stage singing songs, and you need that for their songs.
Yeah.
And it's taken them a long time to find someone, but they seem to have found it. Obviously, I haven't seen it, but I mean, he looks the part.
No, I've seen
and he
it.
sounds it. He certainly sounds it from what I've seen on YouTube and things. So, absolutely right. They wrote these songs. They want to perform them. They need someone there to help them do it.
I get why people say, "Oh, it's not Queen, it's this and that." No, but don't use the word replace. No one's replaced anyone.
No,
they just got someone helping.
Nobody could replace Freddie.
That word
he was. I get very cross when people misuse the word, but he was unique.
Utterly unique.
There is and never will be another Freddie Mercury. I mean, there is no question of that.
Well, sadly, bands aren't given that option to anymore. The industry's changed so much that they don't have a chance for these rock stars do appear, but not as many of them anymore. They're not given that time to grow and to flourish into these wonderful characters. There's a few out there, trust me, but it's just not. They don't have those opportunities anymore.
No, absolutely. I agree with you entirely.
So, God, this is great. We're going all over the place. So Roger, okay, I get on brilliantly with Roger. We're good chums. I love him.
He's great fun.
So the little quote I've got from your piece in the Rainbow Box was, you get the impression that he's always smiling. And having not actually read that, straight away I got it. I get it straight away, just from the way I know him.
Yeah.
So
he was always, smiling and happy. I mean, I have seen him cross when, for example, somebody had set his kit up wrong or whatever. Because again, he's very intelligent.
Yeah.
And none of them suffer fools gladly, I'm afraid.
Yeah.
So one does have to be a bit careful. But yeah, he was always the life and soul of the party. All the girls. It's no secret that he was the one that the girls went for.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Wherever you went, if they went, I didn't exactly scream. It wasn't that kind of band, but the one
gravitated towards
the one that the girls wanted was. And he was very, I'm sure he'll forgive me for saying this, but he was very pretty as well.
Yeah, oh, absolutely.
I
yeah.
mean, he was.
Yeah.
And so
long blonde hair, you know.
there would
absolutely.
be, you know, innumerable young ladies wandering around, you know. But no, he's a very, very intelligent guy, fascinating to talk to, who knew, you know, what he was good at, and I did my best to try and talk about drums and things to him. And I loved, I mean,
I would have loved that you tried to...
I tried. I know nothing about musical equipment. I will freely admit that.
Yeah.
But you know, I learned a little tiny bit.
Yeah.
I remember the very first interview. I had to get him to spell out the names of the bits of equipment, like paste and things like
Brilliant.
that. You know. But I learned a little tiny bit over the years. But I loved the way that they were always trying to innovate. I remember the first time I saw him do the thing where they pour the lager on top of the drum.
What's that?
Well, yeah, he had the drum and he would put. He said it was lager, or it was one. So that when he hit it, you would get these.
Oh, the splash. Oh, okay, yeah, for sure.
But
yeah,
it was lager, I think, the first time he did it.
Lager. Okay, understood. Yeah, yeah. I've seen it before. You know, videos of another water comes up and yeah.
Well, I was told it was lager the first time.
Okay.
It may or may not be, but they were constantly just trying to improve it. I mean, they tried to improve the gigs every night. It seemed to me. They might disagree, but there was certainly the feeling I got.
Right. Okay.
And I think Roger and John, although they weren't up front all the time, I know both did their own songs in any gig, they really did want to, they really were the powerhouse. People would say, oh, well, you know, Brian and Freddie could go off on their own and, you know, get another drummer.
But it's the classic frontman guitarist, isn't it? It's Jagger Richards, it's Tyler Perry, it's that whole kind of...
You talk to Freddie or Brian and they would say, no, they needed them. They needed this powerhouse, this, you know, behind them. And they were, let's face it, they were old friends. They grew up together, you know, pretty much. I mean, they'd known each other since they were teenagers or not much older.
Yeah.
And they knew how each other worked. And I don't think it would have worked without any of them. I mean, for a long time.
Well, they're quite unique in that they had a 20-year career or so, and there were no replacements in the band, which is quite unique for whatever reason.
That's
you know.
right. I mean, they argued all the time. Of course.
That's quite common. They've said that the friction gave that energy, the creativeness. It kept them going. They compete against each other, and you know, it makes it better. You know, so.
And yes, as I said earlier on, the one thing you learned to do was if it wasn't a particularly good gig, you just sort of left them like
duck out. Yeah.
Yeah. Go do something else for a long time.
Yeah.
Maybe see how they were the next night.
Yeah. How are your drums set up, Roger? Good tonight, was it? Yeah, you know.
You got to start new. It's like simple.
Yeah. So John, I mean, we all know that John isn't particularly involved publicly anymore, but very much behind the scenes still. He's very much part of the Queen brand or name and all that sort of thing. But here we have by far the most enigmatic member of the band. I've never met John.
Really?
I've seen him twice physically. One at the We'll Rock You premiere, and once at Party in the Park, which was around the same time, 2002, 2003, backstage, and that was it.
I think enigmatic, in retrospect, is quite a good word, because he seemed to be very quiet. Now, there were moments when he would break out and he would party and he would whatever, but largely he was very quiet and a man of few words. But what was interesting was, certainly in the very early days, and especially when they were having trouble with their management before the current management,
for sure, yeah,
he was generally the one who did the kind of nitty-gritty, who did a lot of the negotiating and the organising.
Yeah.
And so he was, you know, sort of joke about the power behind the throne, you know. I don't like Queen jokes, but it was something that he genuinely did. That he was almost like their sort of business manager inside the band.
I've heard that from John Reid. Obviously, I think when they self-managed themselves in the late 70s, early 80s, he was very much involved in that. He was looking at the books, looking at what they could do.
But he was very quiet, and of course he was a family man earlier than any of the others, because he was already with Veronica, his wife, when I met him.
Youngest in the band, was he the youngest?
Just trying to remember. Yes, I think he is. And he had, when I knew them really well, he'd already had his first little boy, Robert. They used to call him the Frog for some reason. I never quite understood. It was just a joke. But so, and obviously the various wives and things would come to gigs occasionally. So he was just a different kind of person. And so he wasn't much of a one for. And Brian and Roger have always liked to go out and do stuff.
Yeah.
He wasn't much of a one for the party scene, I don't think, and the premieres and all this kind of thing. And obviously he got to the point, I'm imagining, I'm only guessing, that he just didn't want to do it anymore. I think it was as simple as that. So as you say, he's involved behind the scenes, and I'm sure they talk to him a lot, because you can't be with someone all that time and then just cut it off. But by the same token, he's probably, quite happy, and that's what he wants to do with his life.
Absolutely. But when he did contribute, his songs are some of the ones that when he wrote songs, they were big ones.
Yeah, well, that's
they
right.
were absolutely.
Well, I wish I could remember the phrase, but it was something to do with quality rather than quantity. So there may have been only, it's not half a dozen, but you know what I mean. It may have only.
But you write another one bites the dust.
Yeah.
Anyone writes that one song, you're going to be okay for life, or it's such a memorable song. I want to break
You're my
free.
best friend.
You're my best friend.
I think You're My Best Friend was the one where it really came home to people that maybe it wasn't just about Brian and Roger.
Yeah, absolutely.
And obviously Freddie at the front, but that John actually was contributing a lot more than anybody really understood. I think that was the biggest fallacy about the band all the way through, that people sort of thought of him as kind of a spare part, and he wasn't anything like that. He was absolutely integral to it all.
So going back to the Rainbow, so was it the first time you saw it when we saw you down at the Hard Rock Cafe?
It's the first time I've seen this footage since the gig.
What was that like, seeing that and just seeing the reaction of people and seeing them up there, the young Queen? And
I must confess, I was a little bit nervous.
Right, okay.
Because I have a memory of this concert, and also the one in November.
Yes, of course.
So both Rainbow gigs. I remember them being one of the best concerts I ever saw, but that was 40 years ago.
Right.
And you now occasionally will see bands you liked, and then you look back on something 40 years ago and it's very dated.
Sure.
Looks very old-fashioned, and you think, did I really like them then? Okay. I thought the footage was amazing. Yeah. I think if you put that band on today, on a rock stage, people would love it.
You see, that's again the timeless quality that I think you're trying to.
Yeah, it is. It's an absolutely timeless quality. Their music hasn't dated. Even the show hasn't dated. I mean, they were great innovators. They did a lot of stuff before anybody else. The big stage sets, the big crown stage sets, the massive lights, even just the costumes. I mean, we're not talking, stupid suits like the Osmonds. But we're talking classy stuff. Zandra Rose, Freddie's eagle suit, as he called it, the one with the wings.
Oh, the bat wing, yeah.
That was his eagle suit, or his eagle frock. But they just looked the part, and they still look the part. I like to think that, I don't know what they thought about it when they saw it, because they presumably hadn't seen it for a very long time either. But if I were them, I would have been very proud of it, because it was very early days, and yet that would stand up anywhere today. I think
it came across as a clear, heavy, hard rock band that they were in those early years. I know it's been a thrill for a lot of us to actually work on it, because it's been muted for years, and the fan reaction's been fantastic. It came out on record, and we had as much DVD footage as possible you could use, and it was a thrill actually. And I had seen bits and bobs of it, and I'd seen it once before, and I'd actually, though working on it, I'd held back on listening to it too much. So I like getting the final thing and pulling it out and listening to it. And
I got very excited when Michael turned up and had a little look.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not the sort of person who shows it around to everybody, but occasionally people will ask, and everybody who's seen it has been really impressed with it. So
that's the plan, that we kind of sort of like work in a similar way with the rest of the live material that's coming out of the archive. So we're just gradually working on plans to work through. What comes.
Well, I mean, that was a great way to start, I have to say, because that really was a tremendous. I can still see the venue. I remember turning up to the Rainbow that day.
Yeah.
And thinking, they've arrived. This is it. This is the point at which we say, right, they've arrived. They are now big. Forget supporting Mock the Hoople. Forget supporting anybody. They've done their headline tour, and this is the culmination of all that work. Oh. And Sheer Heart Attack was the next thing that came out.
Yeah. So just sort of rounding up. So your relationship is ongoing. you know, in a sort of like a smaller way. But how long were you sort of friendly with the band to sort of quite intensely? What was the time frame?
There were 2 or 3 years where I probably saw them most weeks.
Okay.
Or at least it felt like that, simply because of the kind of paper it was and the fact that they had albums in the charts. They had, you know, and I think basically because they were becoming so big, we would have filled a whole paper with it if they wanted us to.
Sure.
So I saw them a lot until Disc merged with Record Mirror in 1975.
Right.
And then I went on and did stuff at the Sun, and I interviewed them at the Sun, and then I went on to do all kinds of other things. And I was, you know, I would go occasionally to gigs or things that I knew about, and I would see them places and things, and I had friends in the various record company. My husband is in the business, so.
Oh, okay.
And my husband was at EMI.
Oh, okay, there you go.
So, he wasn't my husband then, I hasten to add.
Oh, okay.
So, you know, we still had links, and Paul was there until 1980. But then I had my first son, I had Neil in 1981. So I wasn't able to go to gigs quite, you know, in the same way.
For sure.
If you have small children, you don't.
I know very well, yes.
You can't go on tour. And then I had Ian in 1984.
Okay.
And I was editing a video paper from home. And then I subsequently did the video column for The Sun for 5 years, and went on to do a lot more film and TV.
Okay.
So I think, to be honest, once I'd sort of had the boys, it was a lot harder to, you know, to keep in touch and do that kind of thing. And Freddie by then was doing very different things from everybody else. So really, I kept in touch probably with Brian and Chrissy, his wife, for a while. And then just over the years, you know, you exchange Christmas cards like people do, and you know, when it arrives, you know, send the odd email. Especially if I always feel that, especially people like Brian, are so busy that you don't want to bombard them with emails. But just occasionally, I'll see something like him standing on top of Buckingham Palace and say, "Look, I just had to say that was, you know, that was fun. I loved that." And then, as I say, I was lucky enough very recently to get involved with the charity, which just makes me realise what an amazing guy he is.
It's come full circle.
Come full circle. I've talked more about Queen this year than I have done in the last 38 years. Probably.
Amazing.
Because of the Rainbow set, and it's made me go back and listen to the music again and remind myself exactly when things happened.
Brilliant. That's great. That's what it's all about. Like I've said before, it's such a cliche, but it is a soundtrack of your life, and you can be taken back all over the place by certain songs that just sometimes pop out of nowhere. You go, wow, I remember what, you know, and how you were feeling, and smells, and all that sort of thing comes back. I love it.
And of course, inevitably, my favourite ones are the songs from. My favourite album is Sheer Heart Attack.
I was going to ask you what your favourite album is.
Sheer Heart Attack. You know, I like it all because it's all different. But
how many genres do they play?
Yeah,
really?
Exactly.
They're a rock band, but
you know, when I met them, they were hard rock fans. They were. Some people call them glam rock. I'm not convinced, but they were glamorous, sure. But that was a whole different thing. But really, their roots were in people like Led Zeppelin.
Sure.
I remember having a long conversation with Roger about Stairway to Heaven.
Yeah.
You know,
Zeppelin, The Who, they're
all those bands, and Roger Daltrey, they're very friendly with people like that. So, and that was my kind of music. So Sheer Heart Attack I absolutely loved. Night at the Opera, obviously Bohemian Rhapsody. I remember having a conversation about Bohemian Rhapsody, which ran to either this is going to be the biggest things at sliced bread, or they're crazy.
Yeah.
Because at that point, people were playing 2-3 minute records, and this thing was way beyond that, 6 minutes or whatever it is. And of course, should have known better, really. It wasn't me I hadn't heard it at that point.
Yeah.
And then I heard it on the radio. I thought, God, that's incredible. And I remember
it's bonkers, isn't it? Really. Still to this day, you go,
what? Yeah. I remember doing an interview with Freddie. I was writing freelance, and I was doing something for a magazine about songwriting, hit songwriting and recording, it was called, and it was a sister paper to the Beatles magazine, because I'd done a lot of interviews with Paul McCartney, and then I did the John Lennon one. I'd been doing some work for them, and I did an interview with Freddie about it, and it was very funny because it amused him no end to think of all the deep and meaningful stuff we're putting into Bohemian Rhapsody that just wasn't there. Obviously there was some meaning to it, but I think the quote was, people thought it was a lot more deep and meaningful than it was.
Yeah, that's often the story that's come out. You know?
Yeah,
It's just like, you know, make of it what you will, but he's never revealed. No one ever will. No one will ever know. And you know, sometimes things just work in certain places that they, you know.
Yeah, you could see little bits of influences, you know, that they liked. And I mean, you know, he loved opera, and he did the thing with Montserrat Caballé and all this sort of thing. But you can see little bits you kind of recognise. But I mean, the thing together was just a masterpiece. And the first time I saw the video that went with it, which was the first real pop video, I was just blown away, and I thought, this is the way it's going to go now, isn't it? Once people see this. But I still think it's one of the best that's ever been made. I can see now the 4 heads like that for the Bohemian Rhapsody video. And I watched that and I thought, this is amazing. And it was.
Yeah.
And do you know, I think if they released it again tomorrow, it would be a hit again.
No doubt.
Can't think why they'd bother, but you know.
Yeah. So once your sort of time with the band, well, you moved, they moved on, you moved on once.
Yeah.
So you maintained being a fan anyway, did you? Through all their releases through the 80s and up until
obviously not as close as I would like. I mean, been to very few concerts over the years, but maintained a sort of relationship. Also, a little slightly interesting thing is that Brian was born and lived locally to where I live now.
Right.
And he went to a local school, Hampton School, which is where Tim Staffel met.
Yes,
and where they met and played together and all the rest of it. And when my son went to Hampton School, there was a boy in his class called Andrew Staffel, who of course is Tim's eldest. Okay. And I just came across this on a form list or something and said, oh, it's an unusual name, ask him if his dad's, you know. Yeah. And we subsequently became quite friendly with them, and he and his wife Pam, we sort of go to quiz nights together at school.
Oh, right, okay. And what happens when the Queen questions come up? The music round?
Well, yeah, that would have been fun, I wish they had. And my other son was in David's class, you know, David's class. So it was very funny. And I remember in Neil's very early days at Hampton, him saying that this tall boy had come up to him and said, oh, are you Rosie's son? And he sort of went, I think he was 11 at the time. Yeah, who are you? Oh, I'm Jimmy, I'm Brian's son.
Jimmy.
Dad said to come and say hello. And I think he was a big boy, he was sort of 5th form or something then.
Yeah, okay.
And Brian subsequently went on to become governor at the school.
Oh, right. Okay.
Until he had to give it up because he just doesn't have the time.
No, he's the businessman in the rock business.
But I believe, I haven't been back to school for a while, although I was chairman of the PTA there for quite a long time. But obviously once your kids leave any school, you know.
For sure, yeah.
I haven't been back, but I believe that they've named one of the new theatre there after him.
Oh, I didn't know that.
So it's a big independent boys' school.
Right.
In those days it was about 1,000 boys. So he maintained his, I mean, when he went there it was a grammar school. When Brian went there it was a grammar school in the mid, you know, whenever. And it became independent afterwards, but it still maintained, it wasn't a public school, we're not talking Eton or Harrow or anything like that.
Sure.
It was just a really good grammar school that was independent. And so, and I still see Pam Staffel from time to time, and there are all little, you know, it's just
things
little
that
bits
just pop up
of
now and again.
You know, things that pop up. I mean, I went to the exhibition they did at the Royal Albert Hall of all Freddie's photographs, and his mum and dad were there. Yes. I met Brian's parents once, you know, gig, you know, just odd little bits here and there over the years, and it may sound like a really odd thing to say, I'm just really proud of them.
Oh, that's lovely.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I know that's silly, because I'm just a journalist, they're a massive rock band, but when I think of what they were and how hard they worked, I'm just absolutely thrilled that they are where they are.
That's lovely. That's really nice to hear. And I can see, you know, people.
Did you know what I mean by saying?
You genuinely mean that. I can see that. From everything we've just talked about, I think that actually just wraps it up so wonderfully. The way, you know, the enthusiasm you gave and what you gave, obviously at the time. But I can completely see that in your eyes. I can look at you now. And
I mean, they're great.
They're just great. There you go. They're great.
There are people who don't like them. I don't understand it, but each to their own.
Of course, absolutely. That was wonderful. That's been so much fun.
Did you enjoy it?
Absolutely. An incredible.
Have we missed anything off your list?
No. We went far and beyond my list. That list went out the window ages ago.
It's funny
But
because people used to say to me, they would, can you send me a list of questions? And you go, I don't write them down.
No, these are just pointers for me. And
I appreciate that. I mean, I'd have to take notes.
I just love the way it just goes off, and you will think of something. And we'll talk about that. I don't care. That's the idea.
You laugh. I've got a note in my bag because I had to write down when the gigs were. I mean, I knew when the rainbow gigs were.
Sure.
But when was the was that March? That I saw at the Marquee? In that case, was it October or November that I saw the gig that I wrote?
We'll let you off anyway.
But I worked it out in the end.
Too much good stuff.
If this carries on for the rest of this year, I shall know it all off by heart by the time we've forgotten about it again. I don't know whether it'll still be here when it comes to 50 years.
Oh dear. Well, don't worry, there's planning for that already, don't you?
Yeah.
I've seen the notes.
Well, if Greg Brooks is rewriting all this stuff, we might have some bits we can give him. You never know.
Yeah, you never know, You might be getting another call soon.
Well, I mean, it's fun. And the point is, what they do is very boring. Well, it's not boring. It's not boring. That's not fair. But it's a nice way to earn a decent salary at my age, doing what I'm quite good at, which is stringing a sentence together. But it's not like being a journalist. It's not like being on a national newspaper or being on a music paper.
Sure.
And I do some other things from time to time. I mean, we do ABC Studios. So occasionally I get to write about growing up TV programmes.
Oh, right,
which is,
okay.
So that's why, I was thrilled to bits just to do the Queen press release because it's different,
Yeah.
And I'm writing all day about programmes for anything from the age of your daughters up to about 14.
Yeah.
So,
It's nice to...
I
bet it was nice to cut that sort of popped up. So.
Yeah, it was brilliant. And, as I say, and I still think they're brilliant. So if you're talking to them, send them my love. And
absolutely.
I will. Sure. I'm sure if I carry on doing anything at all for the charity, I will bump into Brian at some point.
You must do, yeah.
But I just feel like it's strange. I feel like I've known him all my life. I still feel like I've seen him. And I think, when did I last actually see him? And I can't remember. But it doesn't worry me particularly. It's just one of those weird things.
Without bringing it to a conclusion on a downer, what was it like when Freddie died?
Awful.
I mean, we touched on it earlier. I remember what I was doing, but I wasn't a huge Queen fan. Then I had their greatest hits too, and they had Innuendo out, and then we found out he was ill, and then he died. That was the way it worked.
Yeah, it was very sudden. I mean, I had heard whispers.
For someone that knew him.
Yeah, I'd heard whispers. The band didn't talk about it.
No.
Certainly not, I think, to anybody outside a very close circle. People knew he was ill. Maybe people suspected what was wrong. But the actual announcement of how ill he was and when he died, it seemed to me it was only about a week apart. It certainly wasn't very long.
Well, the announcement was the day before he died.
Yeah, it was very, very close. I just cried, of course. Yeah. And then I went into the office and everybody was just carrying on as normal, except one of my friends. He was sitting there going,
yeah.
And she said, "Have you heard?" And I said, "Yes." And she said, "Look at this light. They don't care, do they?" So we went out to lunch and we didn't come back.
Yeah.
We just had a few drinks.
Yeah. Raise a glass.
Raise a glass to Freddie. But it was incredibly sad. And I didn't bother them. I sent Mary some flowers, actually. I just thought, rather than, stuff for a funeral, I didn't go. I just sent Mary some flowers and said, thinking of you. And because they were so close. They were best friends. And, obviously they had been partners, but I think she was his closest friend in the world. Mm. And probably, to this day she probably stays. And though she married and had kids and everything else, he was a large part of her life. And so I felt almost sorry for her more than anything. But it's a tragedy. And I was thinking about it this morning because they're talking about how all the new drugs are prolonging the life of people with AIDS. And you think, why couldn't they have had those 30 years ago?
I bumped into David Wigg, Wiggy. Only very briefly, he was, I don't know him sort of thing, but I bumped into him at an exhibition of Freddie photos. And I was there, and I knew who he was. He wouldn't know who I was. So I just went
to say, was that?
Oh, this must have been about 6-7 years ago.
Right, yeah.
It was one down near the Thames. I can't remember what it was. Anyway, I saw him and I said, I know who you are. I've seen videos of you. I know who you are. You I know who I am. So I said, hello, I work for Queen Productions.
Yeah.
And we had a lovely, lovely chat. And one of the last things he said was, unfortunately, with all that's happening now with the drugs, etc., if Freddie could have hung on maybe 18 months,
Yeah.
they would, the expectancy of his life would have been a lot longer.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and then I kind of knew that, but when someone like him tells me it, I just was like, oh.
They were saying
like,
this
oh.
morning, you know, I mean, I'm no expert, but
No.
that really it is no longer a death sentence.
No.
That people can live just as long a life. It might not be quite as it would have been in normal circumstances, but they can live just as long a life
Absolutely.
as they would without them. And that's a waste. I just feel there was so much more he would have done and could have done.
Yeah.
And he would have been still out there. He would have been Mick Jagger, you know, or whatever. He would have still been out there.
I always had this idea in my head that he would have done maybe sort of more opera-y kind of stuff, but I could see him doing just piano concerts. I don't know why, just him at the piano.
Four Fingered Fred, as they used to call
Yeah,
him.
no, I don't know what. I've had this idea that he would be playing sort of solo songs or Queen songs, but he would just go out on his own and it'd be just him at the piano.
I always thought that
I don't know why.
what would happen before we knew Freddie was ill was that eventually they would get to a point where they all had, a bit like the Beatles, they all had solo projects that they wanted to do. So they would kind of split up, but not formally. And then
Never
they would
split
go
up,
off and
apparently. Never split up. Roger Daltrey always said about the Who. No matter if you have broken up, don't tell everyone you broke up.
But they would go off and do their projects. As you say, maybe Freddie in a bit of opera, and Brian would have gone and done the stuff with Kerry Ellis, and they would have done all sorts of things like that, and then come back together again.
Yeah.
Maybe when they felt like it.
Well, I mean, imagine they're still doing stadiums, aren't they?
Yeah, but they would be doing what the Rolling Stones are doing.
Yeah.
That's what they'd be doing, I think. I don't think they could resist it. I genuinely don't think they could resist it. They wouldn't do it as often or for as long.
No, for sure. I mean, we're all.
Yeah. But, they're amazing. I mean, I would love to see it. I would like to have been in your shoes. I would love to have been on the North American tour.
Oh.
Because it must have been amazing.
I mean, personally, for me, it was. I've worked with labels, management, radio, all sorts, and I've done one-off events. I've done the Brits, I've done Mandela shows, but I never toured.
Oh right.
And I did 3 weeks out of the North American tour. And
Are you still alive?
And I mean, look, this wasn't the 70s, but I absolutely thrived off it. I made the decision to go in there and take it for every single minute, and I watched every show for every different angle, from up in the balcony, side of the stage, behind Brian, behind Roger, everything. And I was having to write stuff for it and all that sort of thing, but I was also working the production team, so which is amazing because I got to I spray painted Adam's fans he was using. I was stapling Brian's carpet to the floor, but it was just to be part of it. It's so exciting. One of the most exciting bits is really strange. Is when they'd finished Bohemian Rhapsody and they come back to do the encore. We were rocking with our champions. This is the most exciting bit because I was given a job to hold a towel up for one of the band members when they come off, and then you rush them into the car.
That's right.
Right? I didn't get Brian and Roger. I got Neil, who was playing bass. But when they come off Bohemian Rhapsody and they go behind this little tent, and you can see them absolutely off their faces, buzzing. Honestly, they're like that. And you can hear the crowd stomping and roaring for more, and you can see them still. Just like they're all in a huddle, all of them just going. And Roger's, come on, let's go and do it. And he was shouting, let's go, let's go. It was brilliant. It was so exciting. And I'm getting shivers now. Think about it. And then you see them all rush out again, and I'm stood there, and we would get them all into the cars, and it was that bit was really one of the best bits of it, because you had the crowd here, the band there, the cars were running. And it was bonkers.
Exciting. I mean,
really
I did
crazy.
what you did, obviously not as part of the organisation, but I would watch them from backstage, from the side of the stage, from the auditorium, from the press pit, from wherever. And you get involved.
Yeah.
I even lent Freddie a blouse one night. He said he was going to wear it on top of the pops, but I don't know if he did. It was only a little black flimsy, one of these little tops that you wear on top of other things, but it had demonted a little bits on it. It's quite tasty. Yeah. And he said, I like that, dear. I gave him this little bracelet I had, which a friend had sent me from Japan, because he loved all that stuff.
Yes.
And it was japanned black and grey and silver.
Yeah.
And he said, lend me your top, dear. And he gave it back to me. I've still got it somewhere. But no, I mean, that's the amazing thing about being on tour. The one thing people play music don't understand is you can't go to bed afterwards. You can't go to bed. You can't say, "Oh, I'm knackered now. I'm going to bed." It would always take at least 2 or 3 hours.
Come down, yeah.
They would come down slowly, and whether it was Brian sitting on the roof watching the stars or whatever, or whether they went off and had a party, or whatever they did.
Yeah.
There's no way that anybody can have that much adrenaline coursing through their veins and then just go to bed. And it's amazing. And when you do the kind of show they do, there is so much energy generated.
No, yeah.
Well, long may it last, as far as I'm concerned.
Romantic, can we do it again? Can we do it again sometime? I like that. Ooh, seaside rendezvous. Give us a kiss.